Hello, everybody. Welcome to, I think it's session 4. We're racing through them. So session 4 of the digital sessions for the Museum and Heritage Show. Thank you all for coming along to this one. I've got a really easy job this time. I just have to hand over to Kripa Gurung, who is on the Bloomberg Philanthropy team. She has got a panel session going on. I hope you enjoy it, and there'll be time for questions afterwards.
Okay, I hope everyone can hear me. I feel a bit like Britney Spears right now with this headset on. Thank you all so much for joining us. We're currently at J5 over there, so please do find us after this talk as well. So this session is really going to be focusing on the integral part of coming on board Bloomberg Connects. But before we get to that, and before we get to our speakers, I'm just going to give you a bit of an introduction as to what Bloomberg Connects is and what the app is. I hope quite a few of you in the room are already familiar with the platform and what we do, but if not, we are a free arts and culture app. We launched in 2019, and it is a product and a passion project that is very close to our founder, Mike Bloomberg's heart. We provide a platform for free digital guides for cultural institutions of all disciplines, and right now I think we're on the count up to 1,000, and we have over 4.8 million lifetime users. It's a great way to engage with audiences for cultural partners coming on board, on site and also offline, remotely. It's a great way for people to discover new cultural institutions. Hopefully, if you've already downloaded it, you will see that there are some really big cultural heavyweight institutions with the likes of the Tate, Met, MoMA, and this is international, but also some small institutions who you may not be familiar with just yet. So we help with onboarding these institutions. There is a journey that we take them all on, and I'm joined by the people who steer these people through this journey. And it takes usually about 12 to 15 weeks, but this session really is going to go into what that journey includes, what we expect from our partners who are interested in coming on board, and hopefully, there's going to be time for questions at the end as well. But I'm going to hand it over to our wonderful speakers to introduce themselves. It's also behind me as well, but they have been, over the past 2 to 3 years, really, onboarding over, I think, between them, maybe over 400, 300 cultural institutions across the world. So I'll hand it over to Esther to introduce first, yeah?
They're coming? Yes. Oh, there I am. Hello, I'm Esther White. I work for Art UK, which is an art education charity. I am the Collections Onboarding and Liaison Manager. I've been working on Bloomberg Connects for 3 years, and during that time, Art UK have onboarded over 110 partners, a mix of our Art UK partners and other institutions as well. So I'm a cohort lead. I lead people through the cohort system, which we currently run, about 10 to 15 organizations at a time, going through this process together. And I'm running several of those this year. So, yeah.
Hello. Okay. I'm Francesca Radelli. I'm also a cohort lead onboarding manager, and I work at Imagineer, who's a content creation company. And yes, as I said, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting process, walking we do, in creating the guides.
Hello everyone, my name is Adam White, and like Francesca, I work with Imagineer. I've been an audio guide producer for around 17 years now, and I've been working with Bloomberg for the last 18 months, and yes, working with the crew to onboard clients and cultural partners.
Thank you. So before we really get into the kind of details of this onboarding journey and what it includes, I'm going to throw you guys a question, because obviously you guys deal with multiple partners all the time and building these amazing guides. What is the most, what's been a recent highlight that you've explored or discovered when building these guides? For which institution and what guide?
It's a bit difficult to choose one. There's so many. I'm probably going to cover a few.
Just one.
Okay, just one. So I onboarded a Bath and Bristol cohort who launched in April together, and I think one of my favourites was the Dr. Jenner Museum, which is one of the original homes of vaccination. It was a very important and interesting site which had just reopened. Also with Bristol Museums, who onboarded 6 guides at the same time, which I don't necessarily recommend, but they did it and it was great. And yeah, I'll stop there because I do have more, but I'll let you go.
I'll have to choose an Italian photography foundation that I worked with last year. which doesn't really have a physical space, so it was kind of challenging. But what they do have, it's a huge heritage and a huge archive of photography. And I think it's really interesting to go and check their guide, because what they did is create stories using like their huge archive of images. So they create what they call photo stories. And it's an interesting example of how you can create like a narration based on the images that you have available. It's really, really interesting.
I concur with that one. It's a fantastic guide. I was going to mention one I didn't work with directly, but I have a passion for audio production and audio in guides. And one, the Chroma Arts Centre, which is a wonderful outdoor-based art experience where they were loaned facsimiles of works of art from National Galleries of Scotland, and they placed them all around the town. And they really went to great lengths to present fantastic storytelling in their audio guides, presenting the works, talking about them in such interesting, dramatic ways. They had sound design, very personal stories about what they felt about the art, and I thought it was just terrifically successful, and bravo to them.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. So, I guess, okay, so we're now going to go into the onboarding process and how we commence this. And before we even get to commencing, there is an orientation session that we hold for all of these institutions, all of these prospective partners that are interested in coming on board. And during this orientation, this is where we discover it's a multi-step, it's a collaborative process where we work very closely with these partners. Sometimes, one representative, sometimes a whole team from these partners. So I'd like to ask all of you, during the onboarding process and during this orientation session, what is it that you cover, and what do you think are the kind of key principles that you put in place to make sure that this prospective partner is going to be up and running, and what the timeline looks like, and how do you encourage that, and how do you get the most out of this orientation session?
Yeah, I think Art UK cohorts are a tiny bit different to Imagineer cohorts, but essentially, so we don't run the traditional orientation sessions, but we do cover the same information. So at Art UK, I'm running webinars often. We sometimes have in-person events as well for people to get to know Connects in a place where Connects is there with the organisation. I think the main thing is just letting people know the expectation, the timeline, what will be expected, how many team members you might want to involve. So it really varies. People will involve lots of teams, or I've kind of worked with one person who is a volunteer, and we meet when they can meet. But the information that they need during the orientation is essentially to know, look at your image copyrights, make sure that you have the copyrights for the images that you want to bring on, and really choose a time to onboard which works for you. So we run lots of cohorts throughout the year, and it's about picking a time when you can give this your attention and be part of that 13-week system. I think for most people that's very doable, and people do enjoy the cohorts. So it's just kind of tapping into what people really want to share and why they want to have a digital presence as well. Do you want to have a great audio tour? We do really recommend having audio on your guides. And is there any kind of audience which you might not have tapped into, who you really want to kind of communicate with? And also things like Google Translate. So do you want to know who's coming into your organization? What languages are they using your guide in? All of these things we kind of cover in the orientation, just to get people thinking about what they want from their guide. It's very individual. We can work with what you want to do. It's very customizable. So kind of just drawing that out of you, what you would like to do, and letting you know exactly what happens during the cohort system.
Yes, I'd reiterate that, absolutely. And often we want to reassure people too is about the flexibility, that we want to work with them. We're well aware that people, for them, it's one other part of the job they're already doing. Sometimes doing two jobs anyway, so it's an extra work from that point of view. But we say also that reassurance, but also the flexibility to say, we'll work at your pace. So part of it is also to be realistic and say actually what's achievable in the time you've got, what makes a good guide. So focusing on that content and the stories you want to tell that really give your guide a unique perspective. So it's voices, for example, it's who might speak on the guide, what do you want to highlight of your stories, your collections. So we're very happy to be flexible. At the same time, we're also encouraging people to understand that their first iteration of the guide is a work in progress. So your guide will be launched, but then you're going to build on it and update it as you go through your Connect sort of life.
Yeah, and as Esther was saying, I think one thing that is really important during the orientation session, where you're really setting the scene and kind of letting people start think about the whole process is really understanding, like making them think about what are their objectives, like who you want to talk to, what stories you want to tell, and really like kind of seeding the seeds. Did you say that? Sowing the seeds, sorry. For that, like thoughts and initiating that narration, and of course, like giving a very clear idea of what the process is going to look like, how long it's going to take, because we know like capacity can be quite a challenge sometimes, but really understanding like how much time do I need to invest for how long, and understanding the fact that like all of us that you're saying here, we're there for you and will be there for you across the whole process as well.
I just want to mention also that Francesca does this in 4 languages.
Only 4?
Not really good.
I just want to touch on the cohorts. So you mentioned these cohorts, and I think they vary in size, as in they can be quite small, but they can also be quite big in terms of how many institutions are lined up to do this. What would you say, like in a cohort setting? It's like, I guess it's like a classroom, and I guess all these institutions are coming in, learning from one another, and there's a great space for ideation and sharing ideas. What would you like? Is there a room for personalization? Like, is that how hands-on are you guys when it comes to giving extra support outside of these cohort settings?
I was going to say, well, we obviously meet collectively over the 12, 15-week period. We meet collectively as a team. There's a great chance to discuss principles of what makes an effective guide, principles of working within the system and the CMS. But then we also meet individually, up to 5 times or so, and we go through details of what your guide is and how we're going to make that together. So there's a sense of us working in absolute collaboration and partnership with our cultural partners, and a sense of working with them to make it the best they want it to be and that we can make it be. And whether that's going through the CMS and how it can best serve their purposes, or indeed showing them how certain ways for best practices for audio production or accessibility, for example, is a fantastic way of making them feel that they are making guides that's really going to reach the widest audience.
Yeah, I think my cohorts generally, so similarly, they run for about 13 weeks. There's usually about 10 to 15 organisations on. Some will be neighbours, some will be from all around the UK, my cohorts. During the process, I think, so we have 3 group meetings, which are all recorded, so if not everybody can make it, or you just need something to refer back to, especially the content management system training, you can watch those back anytime that you would like to. And then the rest is one-to-one, so that's where we really talk about what you want to do and kind of take those ideas from the group sessions and apply them to your content and what you would like to do. And then it's kind of, we review what you're doing week to week, however many times you want to have a one-to-one. I'm always available with questions if you want to ask questions. There's also a Bloomberg Connects support centre, which has every question you can imagine is in that support centre for you to have a look at. And I think, especially for Art UK partners, if you have any works on Art UK, we can pull those across for you as well. So it kind of saves you some time, but we're very, very happy to help out and take any work off your plate and really support you through the process.
Yeah, and I think it's a good balance between like the group meetings that you have, like these group sessions that are meant to like kind of trainings and demos where you can have like this kind of feeling of community as well. You're there with other people and you're following the process together, and as well like having the possibility of meeting on a one-to-one basis and really having someone that is there for you, and we can be involved as much or as little as you want. I have organizations that I've worked with that share my reports with me, and I'm like deeply involved in their stories and content, and other organizations where maybe more people are involved are very independent as well, and I'm there to give advice and help.
And so these timelines, so they're 12 to 15 weeks, but they start at different points of the year. So sometimes we've got them starting in 2 weeks, sometimes there's one that's scheduled for perhaps September, and that might fit the timeline of these partner institutions a bit better. I'm going to go on to the challenges, because obviously we set out these timelines and we map out for these institutions what we want to do per week by week basis. But that's kind of sometimes an ideal world, and it doesn't always go to plan, and there are some challenges that always come up in the onboarding process. So from your experience, like what are some of the most common challenges that you see that these institutions of all sizes, by the way, shapes and sizes, what do they usually face, and like how do you as onboarding managers kind of guide them through this process or come up with solutions that suits everybody?
Yeah, I mean, capacity is the biggest one. Most of us have worked in museums in other roles, so I'm very familiar with capacity and kind of pressures on time. You might have other projects that you're currently working on at the same time as onboarding on Connects. So capacity is probably the top challenge which people do face. I think there's other challenges such as needing to have kind of good images. Some people want to take new images. A lot of people use what they have. Some people will leave the organization, some people will join. These all happen quite often. So for me, all I can do on my side is just kind of be there as support. We can work with you in any capacity. If you can only do Tuesdays, we'll make that work as much as we can. If you just need someone to have a look at your content and give you a little review on what you've done so far, we can do that. So I think it's just being flexible from our side and understanding that you have other things that you're doing as well as Connects. And also I think investment from all team members. Sometimes it can be one person who's really spearheading this and they kind of see the vision and they see the need to have the digital presence and kind of bringing other team members on board with that. Again, we're happy to talk to anyone, kind of tell them how great Connects is, and really it's just a collaboration during the cohort and beyond the cohort as well.
Yeah, I mean, of course, capacity is probably the biggest challenge faced by many institutions that we've worked with. And what we do offer is like the flexibility, so we can go at your pace, and we're there to work with you and to understand what are the needs and how we can best support. And I think talking about capacity and team sizes as well, you can involve many different members from your team. I think it's really important to have someone that is like kind of being an ambassador in the team for the project. I think that's something that it's really important to have, something that's passionate about the project. And even if you're a one-man show, I think as long as you're passionate about the stories that you're telling, it's all going to be okay. Also because I don't know if you've had like time to explore the app. Guides come in every shape and size. And the important thing, it's really like reflecting the identity of your organization through the stories that you're telling. So the fact that you might have maybe one audio tour instead of having 10 of them, that's absolutely fine. The important thing is really based on the capacity that you have, based on the resources that we have, how can we make sure that we're telling your story in the right way?
One last thing I have to say that I think I've become aware of different paces that people work at. So the idea actually that some people are very focused on their imagery, for example, and they'll be furiously gathering their assets and working on those. But you won't see any work in the CMS, and they could be also working on their plan, on their content, but you may not see the active part of that. They may share it with you at a part of a meeting, but you may think actually they're taking a slow time getting started. And what's really happening is they're gathering things there, and they're prepping it in a really sort of logical and coherent way. And when it comes to putting it in the CMS, that comes together very, very quickly. So I've learned not to panic if it looks quite quiet to begin with, because we help them it'll come together in the end. And that's a nice way of just understanding how they want to work and making them feel as comfortable and relaxed as possible. And
I think another element which some of you may already be thinking about is about content, and what are you as an institution expected to bring forward to Bloomberg Connects and the CMS, the internal backend that we're talking about. And so I think that can be quite an intimidating area for a lot of people to tackle when it comes to content creation and thinking about ways to create engaging content. Like, what is it? So I mean, how do you all, when you speak to these partners and you have this orientation session and you say, this is what we'd love for you to bring forward, and they think, okay, well, maybe we don't have enough, what if we want new content? How do you encourage these partners to think confidently about and feel confident about creating new content? And, where does your expertise come in with this? Like, is it from, again, those that cohort session where you're learning from one another, or, how do you encourage that? And how do you inspire each other to think about it?
Well, I think actually we're extremely lucky because the people we tend to work with are passionate. They're museum and gallery professionals. They are passionate about their work. They're passionate about their audiences. And they're extremely keen to put their message across. And I think for the guide to reflect their personality and to be the companion tool that guides put around their exhibition space. We're also aware that the guide is primarily made for people who have come to you physically, but actually there's a large number of people who may be either pre-booking or looking at your site in advance to arriving, or indeed are in a different country and planning a visit next year, or just generally curious about your collection. So there's a sense, I think, that we're lucky that we're working with people who are passionate about what they do, but encouraging them to find that skill within themselves, whether it's audio production, whether it's within writing or anything else, I think comes from those one-to-one sessions when you realise actually it's a question of just either harnessing it or showing how we can support them. So I think we can support in several ways, both with the audio production and the writing side, and allowing them to understand what the guide actually is. So it's not a website, it's a companion piece. It's a guide to give somebody depth and insight to your collection, to your stories.
I think, so in my kickoff sessions of the cohort, I ask people to bring a fact about their organisation. It's not a terrible icebreaker, so it should be easier to think of a fact about your organisation than yourself. And I find during that session I kind of took those facts away to bring them out when people need inspiration for kind of what is their story and what has their story been so far and where do they want to go. And I think Connects is quite unique. I think some people don't have access to their website. They might not have places where they can, put their creative energies into. So I've seen a lot of curators kind of create curators' corners on Connects, or Nottingham Castle does current research that we're looking into, and the curators just go into Connects and kind of write what they're working on, and I think that's quite nice. That's kind of hits the point of it being behind the scenes. So I think although it can be daunting to come in and look at a blank content management system, there's always ideas in what you already do, and it's kind of just letting those ideas come out. People go and interview their front of house staff for their favourite items, maybe ask them to do a little audio to accompany it, and kind of build that community within your team as well, really involving everyone. I think that's what brings out the stories in what people are doing. And remembering that stories which are very well known to you, people don't know. So things which you see every day, which, you're like, oh, I see that every day, and it's people come in and they cry and, which is, I used to work at the Bronte Parsonage, so that was definitely, there's a lot of crying. So yes, I think things which you walk past every day, we can really bring those out on Connects to show people what's so interesting, what's your unique selling point, and there will be one, so we'll find it if you don't already know it.
Yeah, I often find myself asking the organizations that I work with, like, if you have, like, you're inviting your friends over and, like, you're trying to explain them what's your job. Like, I found myself in that situation a lot, and it's not easy to explain to people what you do and what you're passionate about. And I see when they do that exercise, it really brings out something that's really unique about their organization. And there's a nice example, or an organization, a German organization that I'm working with right now, and we had this discussion when we started, like, during our first session, and we were just saying, like, okay, so if you're inviting your friends over to this museum, there's so many things to see. Where do you bring them? What do you tell them? And these, like, I'm working with 2 interns. They're deeply passionate about the museum that they work in, and this really sparked such a creative approach. So they really set themselves in the shoes of their friends, their peers, and they said, okay, this is a contemporary art space, which is incredible, but not so easy to access. So sometimes with their friends, they go visit museums, but they find themselves, like, not really at ease. You have to feel like you have to show that you're confident. So they try to deconstruct that approach and really create a guide that's like, you take a walk, like now I'm taking your hand and you take a walk with me through the museum. And it's something so simple, because it's just two friends that are talking about the space that they work in, and it's so powerful. So really, like, I think Connects is on your phone. We use that every day for very personal connections, and it's really, I think, tapping into those connections as well. We have so many stories to share.
One more thing from me. I think it's useful to say that you can repurpose other content. So if you have worked with an artist and they happen to do a video or an audio and that has nowhere to live, we want to see it on Connect. I think people enjoy that content, and it also gives it somewhere to live and have a bit of new life. So it's certainly not that everyone comes in and creates everything completely from scratch when they come in to Connect. So definitely look at what you already have and think about how you can present it, maybe freshen it up a bit for the current audience.
I also had one last thing that there's so much in Connect already. There's so many institutions. I think we're 900 institutions right now. And it's a large community of really creative and passionate people. So even exploring the app, there's so many ideas that you can tap into, steal easily. It's really like inspiring to take a look and explore. Maybe not steal. Sorry.
Borrow?
Borrow.
So I guess after the onboarding, there's the launch, which is this incredible moment where we see, your cohort almost graduating really of, these cultural partners going live into the world of Connect. And I just want to talk about post-launch as well, because, you've heard from, how this amazing team kind of worked together so closely with these institutions throughout the onboarding process. But, maybe that hand-holding kind of goes away after post-launch, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But, if you can speak to, what is expected of these partners post-launch? You've been here kind of shepherding them through this onboarding process. And what are your kind of final takeaway thoughts that you give them after their launch moment to say, this is how you maintain your guide, this is how you upkeep? What are some of the key lessons that you want them to impart this onboarding process with?
Thanks. I was going to say that if we've done our job well, they've enjoyed the process. They've enjoyed making their guide, they've enjoyed looking at their collection or their institution in a different way, and they've enjoyed the launch of it, which is no small achievement after all, and it's great to be on there. I think there's a sense too that when the guide is live, people will come flooding through your door, and it may not happen the next day, it may be a slower process than that. But I think the idea is that we always say your guide is not just a work in progress, but something to be built on and improved and updated regularly. If they've enjoyed the process doing that, and they've understood that regular updates keep your audience interested and have them keep them returning to you, then that's a win-win for them and their audience as well. So we absolutely encourage that. We obviously encourage a direct way of communicating, so work by audio, for example, if you have a temporary exhibition, focusing on that and making it feel really relevant and new and updating, keeping your social media feeds updated too with what's going on at your institution, and how the Connects can feed into that is a really, I think, easy way of keeping the guide fresh and live.
I agree. I think, so once you have gone live, you can edit your content anytime you like. You don't need to ask our permission to go in and add to your content. I think we want to know that it's up to date, so if you do have an exhibition, it would be nice to see it on Connects, ideally even, and to add some of those items which people can expect to see, just so that we can keep the on-site experience kind of synchronous with the digital experience as well. But no, we don't disappear after launch, and we certainly want to know what you're working on, exhibitions that you're doing, and we will do our best to kind of support what you're doing as well. Recently, the Holborn Museum launched, and you should have a look at their tour. It's got a Bridgerton cast member, because they are a home of Lady Danbury in Bridgerton. Adam actually helped with their audio tour that Lady Danbury did. So, yeah, this all came post-launch. This was something they did post-launch, and it is great. So do go have a look. But all that to say, we're still here for you post-launch.
Yeah, exactly. Like the relationship does in hand with the launch of the guide. And maybe to add, we were talking about capacity before, and I think sometimes what we try to do is create guides that if you don't have a huge capacity during onboarding, we can create a guide that relies on evergreen content, stories that people can go back to, behind the scenes content, to really bring them within your organization and really create a more intimate connection. And that's content that once you've created, your users start using it, and you don't need to refresh it too often. And one interesting aspect about the app as well is that in the content management system, what you get is as well insights about how people are accessing your content, and how people are, how much are they listening to your audio files, which exhibitions they're passionate about the most. And I think that insight can also really help in understanding, they're really going for the audio, I'll do a bit more. Maybe this exhibition was not as successful, and maybe ask a few questions, understand which languages people are using the most through Google Translate, and maybe you never thought about doing a tour in German, and that's your chance to start experimenting with that.
Great, thank you. And what Francesca's referring to is on the back end, we've got this thing called a data dashboard on the content management system. And because, I mean, this is the Bloomberg hat on saying we're obsessed with data and we want to help you as much as possible. And, I think the data dashboard has been really helpful in informing a lot of cultural partners what their content strategy should be. So to Francesca's point about audio, you see that people are picking up putting in the headphones and listening to audio a lot more than perhaps, they're sitting down to watch videos. And you can see the completion rate for these audio clips. You can see which languages people are opening these guides in as well. As it stands, Bloomberg Connects, if you've got written content, we can, translate it automatically into, I think, 51 languages now, which is amazing. I think that goes, hand in hand with accessibility and making all of this content accessible, which, by the way, I should have said at the beginning, but, it's completely free. Like all of this... And it's the most commonly asked question, and it saves you from asking me at the end maybe, but all of this expertise that we're offering out during the onboarding process and even after, this is all free. And that's because it's a truly philanthropic cause, and this partnership is philanthropic to its very core. And I should also say, with the post-launch, these guys help with the onboarding and are there on hand to help throughout the training process, throughout, marketing needs as well, kind of pointing you in the right direction as to how to best promote your guide on site and online. But also post-launch, there's post-launch care. So we put a plan in place that makes you feel looked after, that, if you need a replenishment of marketing materials, we can help you with that. If you need further advice, again, if you want to create a new audio guide, maybe you want to tap back into those resources, we can absolutely, join a call and do that. I think, and Adam, you mentioned it, like flexibility. I think that's one of the key kind of driving points behind Connects is, we work to your timeline and we work to your strategy and we try and help where we can. Anyway, that's my piece. But I have one final thing, and I think we're close to finishing up before we open the floor to Q&A. But I think for you, if you're going into this orientation session, which I mentioned right at the beginning is how we commence the onboarding process, what is it that you wish partners come prepared with? Like if there are 3 kind of essential things that would make your life a bit easier as an onboarding manager, what do you wish they could come prepared with or have a good idea of?
I think the one thing is the understanding of their visitor journey. So this app is the platform is an incredible tool because it can really help enhance like a visitor journey that can be really cohesive. So understanding how they navigate through the space, how they get to your organization, and what do they need when they are there. And I think understanding, kind of starting to visualize that journey that they have, and like where the highlights, the hotspots where you can provide them with information, where they can maybe sit down and enjoy a bit of story. So really like an understanding of their audience and what their audience needs in the space.
I think having an understanding of how you can access all your images, if you are not the curatorial team, being able to have contact with the curatorial team for any interpretation, just kind of getting the teams aware that this is happening. And I also, I think just thinking about what time you have to give to it, and whether you can commit to the 13 weeks. As we said, it's okay, we can be flexible with 13 weeks, but just having a bit of an idea of what your story is in this first instance of the cohort system and that launch. You might not put every single thing that you have onto Connect. So what are the must-haves? What are the things which, when people visit, this is what they generally want to see or know more about? And I think that's probably enough to start with, and the rest comes out in the cohort.
And I was just to say lastly, I think it's a sense of bringing your colleagues on board as well, making them feel a part of it. I think there's a real sense that it can feel not just daunting for one person doing it necessarily, or depending on the size of your team, but that idea that many people can feed into it, and bringing your colleagues into it makes them feel engaged and work and sort of a part of the process too. And they might find they have brilliant ways of helping you make your guide together, and that sense of thinking who might be best served in which field. I suggest that.
Great, thank you. Thanks. Thank you to our lovely panelists. Thank you. I think we have 2 minutes for a couple of questions. If not, like I mentioned, we're J5, so please do come and say hi to us.